A cold morning over the northern coast, the wind carries the scent of salt, smoke, and blood. Somewhere in the distance, horns bellow, and the silence before the storm becomes thicker than the air itself. What did a man eat who in a few hours was to step into the abyss of battle, knowing that only 1 in 10 would survive? What nourished the body and spirit of those who went to their deaths without flinching? Archaeologists found charred bones, grain, and traces of honey at Viking settlements. These findings are traces of an ancient pre-battle sustenance ritual, not just meals, but trials for the body, and a symbol of purification. Historians write that before battle, the Norsemen ate boiled meat and drank intoxicating mead, not for taste, but for strength. They believed that every spoonful was a step towards Valhalla. A thick stew of barley and dried meat was called by the word suppa, a simple, crude, yet life-filled word. It was cooked in cauldrons, at the bottom of which salt settled, a trace of the northern seas, and fat rose to the top, which was used to grease swords so they wouldn't rust. Body and weapon were nourished by the same fire. Before battle, Vikings held a feast, but not for pleasure. This feast was called symbol. It was a ritual during which each warrior uttered an oath. He promised how many enemies he would kill, what trophy he would bring. To break the oath meant to condemn oneself to dishonor. Symbol was not just a banquet, it was a sentence pronounced upon oneself. The food at this feast was austere: boiled lamb, oatcakes, a honey drink, and if meat symbolized strength, then honey, memory. For it was believed that honey connected the living with the spirits of the fallen. When a Viking drank honey before battle, he was as if placing a hand on his ancestor's shoulder. At excavations in Birka, a trading center of Scandinavia, archaeologists found remains of such feasts, charred bones and vessels with traces of fermented honey. In them, traces of wild raspberries, juniper berries, and cereals. This means that the drink was not only intoxicating, but also ritualistic. Its power lay not in intoxication, but in a reminder. You are part of a lineage, and even death will not sever this connection. Dense chunks of meat, the crunch of bread, warm honey, all this mingled with the scent of smoke and sweat. And when a man raised his goblet, he looked not at the food, but through it, into the eyes of fate, because the feast was not an end, but the beginning of a journey. The journey began with the taste of blood on the tongue, but not another's, his own. Yet not everyone ate equally. Warriors from the Jarl's retinue received meat, fish, and grain, while the poor made do with porridge and dried fish. But in the moment before battle, the difference vanished. By the campfire sat side by side a slave and a chieftain. They were united by one thing: the anticipation of the blow that would decide everything. It was believed that one who ate greedily before battle was afraid. A true warrior ate slowly, as if tasting fate. Strength comes not from food, but from resolve, an Icelandic chronicler later wrote. And if a piece remained in the bowl, no one dared to touch it. That was the share of the fallen. But why did the Vikings so believe in this connection between food and death? Why was each of their feasts not merely sustenance, but a farewell? The answer lay not only in faith, but also in their understanding of the body as a temple. They prepared themselves for battle, not only with the sword, but also with what they put on their tongue. For a body filled with the right food was considered a vessel for the will of the gods. And as the smoke from the campfires stretched towards the gray sky, the northern warriors ate in silence, listening to the wind carrying the roar of the surf. Tomorrow this sound would mix with screams and steel, but today only the taste of salt, mead, and fate. The flames of the campfires hum like the breath of a beast. Shadows of warriors dance on the walls of the longhouse, where it smells of smoke, sweat, and iron. The night before battle, not a time for sleep. This is a time of preparation, not only for death, but also for life, which continues in glory. What did these people eat, whose hearts beat in the rhythm of drums and wind? What gave them the strength to stand under a rain of arrows and not flinch? Historians note, the Viking diet was surprisingly balanced for its time. It included meat, fish, grains, dairy products, vegetables, and wild berries. But on the night before battle, food held a special meaning. It was not merely a meal, it was preparation for the ritual of battle. Every movement, every spoonful, every breath was part of a sacred cycle. When the body began to hum with fatigue, the warriors ate a dish that archaeologists find in almost every settlement, a thick barley porridge with meat. It was called hlingr, a simple word, but behind it lay a philosophy of survival. Hlingr was boiled for a long time until the grains became soft, like snow in the spring sun. This dish provided energy for long hours of battle. There were no delicacies in it, only strength. Meat was boiled together with onions, carrots, and radishes. Sometimes dried fish was added, or a piece of lard was put in, a source of fat that helped survive the cold. Food was prepared in large cauldrons of bronze or clay over an open fire. The cauldron was called kettle, a sacred vessel through which the will of the gods passed. And when the warriors scooped food from it, they believed that they were taking into themselves not just meat, but a particle of the cosmos, order from chaos. Everything happened in silence. Only the crackle of fire and the rare clatter of knives against bowls. Silence was their prayer, not with words, but with deeds. For Vikings did not ask the gods for mercy. They gave thanks for the opportunity to die with honor. Nearby stood vessels with a drink they called mead ale. It was a drink of strength. It was prepared from honey, water, and wild yeast. Sometimes berries and herbs were added. Scientists who examined the remains of such vessels found traces of wormwood, heather, and bistort in them. These plants gave the drink its tartness and helped with concentration. Drinking this ale before battle was a special act. Each sip, like a heartbeat, not for intoxication, but for clarity. For Vikings believed intoxication clouds the mind, but a true warrior must face death soberly. That is why they drank little. Most often, the cup was passed around so that everyone could feel the breath of brotherhood. Salt held a special place. This white powder, which cost more than silver, was extracted from the shores of the fjords or brought from the south. No dish was complete without it. Salt not only preserved meat, but was also considered a symbol of purity and eternity. Before battle, they rubbed it on their skin and weapon handles. It was believed that salt warded off evil spirits and strengthened the soul. Those who had already lost friends in previous campaigns placed a small piece of bread on the ground. This custom was called the gift to the dead. It was burned in the flames of the campfire so that the fallen could partake along with the living. Archaeologists find charred flatbreads next to the remains of campfires, silent confirmation that this rite was not a legend but a reality. Many historians believe that such rituals had not only spiritual but also practical significance. A communal meal strengthened discipline, creating a sense of unity. For after such a dinner, there was no I, only we. When a warrior rose from the table, he no longer belonged to himself. His body, it was a weapon, his will an order, his breath a part of the wind. It smelled of grease and smoke, skin gleamed with sweat, cauldrons emptied, and hearts filled. This was the last night of peace, and each felt its weight. For in the morning everything would change. At dawn they would awaken to the cry of gulls and the clang of weapons. The cold air would burn their lungs. The ground would become slippery with dew. But while the fire was still alive, the warriors sat by the campfires, gazing into the flames as if into a mirror. In this reflection, both fear and resolve and the memory of those who ate the same bread, drank the same mead, and walked to meet their fate. Where the feast ends, the journey begins, and this journey smells of smoke, salt, and the sea. Morning, cold, sharp, like a blade forged from wind. The sky is overcast with gray clouds, and every breath smells of salt and metal. On the shore, where anchor chains clang, stand people in chainmail. Their faces are motionless masks, but in their eyes, flame. It is time to eat one last time before battle, not to sate oneself, but to remind oneself why one is alive. Archaeologists found remnants of morning meals in Scandinavian burials, oat grains, pieces of dried fish, traces of fat on clay bowls. These findings indicate, before battle, Vikings ate little, but nutritiously. Their breakfast was not gluttony, but calculation. The stomach needed to be full, but not heavy, so that blood would not go to digestion, but remain in the muscles. They ate porridge with water, sometimes adding a spoonful of honey or milk. Porridge made from oats or barley was called grud, a simple dish, but it was precisely what sustained the warrior's strength throughout the entire day. It was cooked over a campfire right by the shore, in iron cauldrons. The smell of grud mingled with the iodine of the sea and the char of torches. One slowly stirred the porridge with a spoon, another sharpened his sword. Food and steel united in one rhythm, the rhythm of preparation. After eating, each took out his sayax, a short combat knife that was both a tool and a weapon. With it, they cut meat, sharpened arrows, and killed. The word sayax itself gave its name to entire peoples, the Saxons, people of the knife. When a warrior brought a piece of food to his lips, he held the sayax in the same hand with which he would later strike the first blow. This gesture was a reminder, even in eating, you are a warrior. Some chroniclers wrote that before battle, Vikings rubbed their faces with animal fat. This was not done out of superstition. The fat protected the skin from cold and sun, but in the eyes of contemporaries, this sheen gave them a demonic appearance. The sun reflected off their skin as if off metal, and when an enemy saw an approaching man with a gleaming face and empty eyes, he saw not a man, but a myth. At dawn, the sound of a horn rang out, long, low, like the roar of the sea. It was a signal to gather. A few more moments, and the campfire flames died down. Warriors stood up, tightened their belts, checked their swords. Someone threw the last piece of bread into the ashes, a sign of farewell to the past. Before going into battle, many drank a warm herbal decoction made from bistert root, juniper, and moss. This drink was called bitrum. It cleansed the breath, imparted vigor, and strengthened the stomach. Archaeologists find its recipes in the traces on ceramic vessels, where chemical analysis revealed precisely these plants. And although modern science explains this as an attempt to support metabolism, for the Vikings themselves it was a drink of strength, a gift of the earth. The food ended, but not the ritual. After the meal, silence began. No one spoke. Only breathing and the clang of metal. This moment was called stillfur, the silence before the storm. It was observed not out of fear, but out of respect. It was believed that loud words could scare away the gods, while silence made the soul heavy, like a stone. Historians debate how strictly these customs were followed, but all sources agree on one thing. Vikings attached great importance to how the day of battle began, for the morning ritual was their internal tuning. What for us today is coffee and breakfast, for them was a connection with ancestors, with those who had already fought before them and who awaited them in Valhalla. It smelled of char, sweat, and metal. The sun broke through the clouds as if a sword flashed. Warriors lined up in a skjaldborg, a shield wall. This term described a formation where each shield covered its neighbor. Thus, a unified armor was created, breathing and moving. At the moment of formation, each warrior felt his body become part of a living organism. And yet, before stepping forward, they made one movement. They touched an amulet on their chest. It was Mjolnir, Thor's hammer, a symbol of protection and strength. It reminded them that above their heads was not just the sky, but the will of the gods. He who went into battle did not know if he would return alive, but he knew that his name would not disappear. The silence burst like an ice crust on water. The clang of swords, the roar of horns, the cries of birds. The battle began, and everything that had been eaten transformed into the energy of a blow, into breath, into a cry. Food became the flesh of fury. And at that moment, when the first blade cut through the air, the taste of morning porridge dissolved into the coppery taste of blood. Bodies, nourished by barley, fat, and faith, moved as one living organism. This was a feast, but a different one. A feast of war. And somewhere there, beyond the smoke and the sea, in the heavenly halls, Odin watched, to see which of them was destined today to finish their meal in Valhalla. The roar of battle tore through the morning. The air trembled like a taut bowstring. Smoke hung over the field, and the smell of iron mingled with sweat and blood. What began as a feast transformed into a ritual of survival. Vikings advanced, feeling their bodies work precisely and powerfully. Every sinew, every muscle, every drop of sweat had a price. For just a few hours ago, they had eaten what now became their fuel, their weapon. Historians note, thanks to a nutritious diet and a habit of physical exertion, Vikings could fight without rest for 6 and sometimes even 8 hours. Archaeological studies of bones show that they had strong but worn joints and a dense muscular structure. They were not giants, as in legends, but were stronger than most people of their time. In battle, they moved as a single organism. Each warrior knew his place in the formation. This tactic was called svinfylking, or swine array, a wedge-shaped formation that pierced enemy ranks like the tip of a spear. Those who marched in the front rows did not eat since the evening. They required lightness, quick reactions. Those who stood behind, on the contrary, ate more, because it was they who held the formation, supporting the shield wall with their mass. Heavy breathing, the clang of metal, the crackle of wood, all of this sounded like one enormous drum. Warriors, nourished by fat and grains, endured cold and fatigue longer than the enemy. They knew that every spoonful of morning porridge was another sword strike, another chance to survive. When someone fell, his place was taken by his neighbor, and behind him, yet another. Their bodies moved not out of fury, but out of habit. A habit developed over years of campaigns and those very ritual feasts. Food, training, faith. Everything merged into one rhythm, the rhythm of battle. Chronicles describe that in the midst of battle, Vikings sometimes threw bread or meat into the air. This was a sign of offering to the gods. In their belief, if food did not enter a mouth, it would go to Odin, for battle was not just a physical act, but communication with higher powers. And in every piece, in every drop of drink, a prayer was hidden. The word fury in Scandinavian sounded like berserk. This was the name given to those who entered a state of battle frenzy. These people felt no pain. Their movements became inhuman. Modern historians suggest that on the eve of battle, they consumed a drink based on fly agaric or henbane, but not for intoxication, for transformation. They transformed into beasts, and their bodies, filled with food and poison, became temples for strength. Berserkers did not wear chainmail, only animal skins. Their breath smelled of blood and herbs. When they burst into the enemy's formation, it seemed that the very earth trembled. Archaeological finds confirm the existence of such warriors. In some graves, bone masks adorned with fangs and claws have been discovered. These are not decorations. They are part of the ritual, a symbol of transition between man and beast. But even a berserker needed food, and his food was special. Chronicles tell that before battle they ate the heart of an animal, most often a bull or a wild boar. This ritual was called Kjotfest, a meat feast. It symbolized the transfer of the animal's strength to the warrior. The heart was placed on coals, roasted, and shared among them. Each piece was an oath. I will not retreat. The smell of scorched meat mingled with smoke, and the warriors, bathed in sweat, advanced. The food, having become a part of them, now moved their hands, quickened their pace, led them to glory. For Vikings, food did not end at the table. It continued to live in the body, in the bone, in the breath. When the battle reached its climax, the sun rose above the smoke, and light reflected off the shields. In that moment, each of them felt everything around lose form. Sky, sea, earth, one whole. The body ceased to be a body, transforming into a weapon. And in this fusion with chaos, in this rhythm of cries and steel, an ancient taste resounded, the taste of salt, barley, and blood. According to Scandinavian sagas, after such battles, warriors would say, "We ate glory." This was not a metaphor. They truly believed that food and victory were one and the same. Victory was food that you had wrested from death, and when the battlefield fell silent, when blood soaked into the earth, only one question remained. Would there be enough strength to live until the next feast? Because for the northern warrior, the feast never ended. It simply changed location. First, by the campfire, then in battle, and then perhaps in the halls of Valhalla, where mead flows like a river and roasted meat never runs out. But only those who ate and fought honorably could reach there. The evening after battle smells of smoke and death. The air is thick, as if one could scoop it up with a hand. The ground is strewn with weapons, bones, scraps of clothing. And amidst all this, warriors who are still alive. Their eyes are dull, their hands tremble, but their breathing is steady. They do not shout, do not celebrate. First, food. Only then, words. Chronicles tell that after battle, Vikings always held a feast, not for joy, but for recovery. Food returned life to them, as if refilling their bodies with blood. Historians write that these meals were part of warrior discipline. Without them, one could not move on. For a body that had lost blood and energy required replenishment. The first thing prepared after battle was broth made from the bones of fallen animals. This thick decoction was called supadratna. It was boiled for a long time with added salt, parsley root, sometimes dried seaweed. It was believed to restore warmth and strength. Warriors drank it hot, directly from wooden bowls, while smoke still rose above the ground. The warmth from the fire passed through their fingers, through their veins, and with it, life returned. Those who could walk gathered the remains of comrades. The killed were burned or buried, and their share of food was placed near the campfire. It was an ancient custom to share a meal with the dead. No one dared to eat more than was due to him until he had given a portion to the fallen. Archaeologists find charred flatbreads and bones arranged in a pattern at such sites, a trace of this rite repeated for centuries. Then meat was placed on the fire, most often beef or pork. It was roasted on sticks, sprinkled with salt and herbs. It smelled of heat, smoke, and sweat. When the meat began to crackle, the air filled with a sound that was akin to music. For a Viking, the sound of roasting meat was a symbol of life. If you hear this crackle, it means you are alive. A special dish was sverdmate, meat marinated in honey and vinegar. It kept longer and helped heal wounds. Modern researchers suggest that acid and honey indeed possessed antiseptic properties, but for Vikings, this was not a chemical process, but magic. When they ate sverd meat, they believed that with each spoonful their body was cleansed of the enemy's blood. The drink after battle was weak ale, diluted with water. It quenched thirst and prevented intoxication. Drinking without restraint was forbidden, only after a toast to the fallen. This toast was called skål. The cup was passed from hand to hand. Each drank and uttered the name of a fallen comrade. And while these names were spoken, it seemed that the dead sat nearby, listening quietly, sharing the warmth of the fire and the smell of roasted meat. The warriors ate in silence. Only the crackle of the campfire and the hum of the flames filled the air. When their first strength returned, someone began to sing. These songs were called drotkvat, heroic stanzas about battle. They were not complaints. These were reports before eternity: who fell, who stood firm, whose blood was spilled on the stones. The poetic rhythm replaced prayer. For the northern people had no sacred texts. Memory fulfilled their role. In the evening, fog rose over the field. Warriors sat closer to the campfires, covering themselves with cloaks. In their hands, a piece of bread and a wooden spoon. Bread, not just food. It symbolized the earth on which they stood. Vikings called it jordgav, a gift of the earth. It was believed that by tasting bread after battle, you connected with your native land, and it accepted your blood as a sacrifice. Sometimes an old man appeared among the campfires, a skald. He did not fight, but he knew all the names of the fallen. He sang of them, calling each by name, and the warriors listened without raising their eyes, because in his song they heard not only the past, but also the future. For everyone knew, one day, someone would sing about him too. Archaeologists find bronze bowls with engraved inscriptions. Memory, our feast. These words are repeated in different regions, from Iceland to Gotland. This is not a motto and not a prayer. This is the essence of their world. As long as they remember, you are alive. When the food ended, the warriors threw bones into the fire. This was a sign of the feast's end. The flame rose, crackled, as if answering them. From this moment, the battle was considered concluded. They could again sleep, again eat, again live. But at the bottom of each cup remained a sediment: honey, ash, memory. That night, smoke from the campfires stretched towards the sky, as if wanting to reach Asgard itself. And somewhere there, in the halls of Valhalla, old warriors raised their goblets to meet the new ones. The feast continued, simply on the other side of death. When dawn broke, the wind carried away the smell of char and salt. The campfires died down, and over the earth remained only silence. Those who survived the battle slowly rose. Their faces were covered with soot, their hands with blood, but in their eyes, calm. They knew the cycle was complete. Feast, battle, meal after, all these were parts of one breath. Historians write that it was precisely through these sustenance rituals that Vikings connected life and death into a single whole. Food was, for them, a bridge between worlds. It began by the campfire and ended in Valhalla. It was believed that one who ate with honor would die with honor. In archaeological layers, many vessels have been found where, along with food remains, lie fragments of weapons. This is not a coincidence. Vikings placed food and a blade nearby so that a warrior in the afterlife would not be hungry and would not remain without protection. Their belief in the power of the meal was deeper than belief in victory itself, and when the sun rose over the field, they departed, carrying with them not trophies, but memory. Each step resonated with pain in the body, but beneath the skin lived strength, that very strength which was born from smoke, barley, and salt. They knew this taste would remain with them until the end. Do you hear how the flame crackles, how the meat sizzles, how the honey drips? This is the sound of an ancient promise. Of Vikings' food was not just sustenance, it was an oath by the body, an oath to stand until breath ran out. And now, when you know what the warriors of the North ate before battle, ask yourself, would you have had the strength to eat your last piece of bread, knowing that tomorrow it might become your last?